Welcome to the Ephesiology Podcast, a podcast dedicated to the study of the early Christian movement and its implications for the church today. My name is Andrew. I am the associate pastor at Neartown Church in Houston, Texas. We are joined, as always, by Michael, our resident ephesiologist. And today, again, part two, we are joined by Steve Leston, president and CEO of To Every Tribe. Thank you, Steve, for giving us your time to keep chatting on some of these fun things.
Oh, man. Thank you, guys. It's a huge honor to be here. So glad we get to do this and talk about these topics.
Okay,
yeah, well,
so
they're important topics, aren't they? And you've done such a great job in giving some clarity and thinking to them. So I'm looking forward to how this is going to roll out as we get into the pod.
Okay, now we said this is part two, right? So if you're listening to this, if you found it in your podcast feed and you're excited to listen to part two, great, but you do need to listen to part one just to have a context. We are talking about mission and where it is going today in what Steve is calling a post-everything world. What is it looking like? And Steve, I think you have done some incredible work looking at what we are truly looking at, trying to parse out what's in front of us. And here today, we wanted to talk about what are some of the forces that are shaping our world and how they are impacting the church. Now, just even as I frame that, what do you mean, Steve, when you're talking about those forces that are out and about that are impacting us?
Yeah, I like that question. And maybe just a little small context so this will make sense. When you look at the work of ministry, church planting, missions, sometimes it's easy to just try to find a model. You know, a lot of church planners, they want to find a singular model for something and then just like run that play. We've got one play, we're running that play, we're just going. Or mission, we just got this singular model, we're going to run it all the time. But a lot of times those models are designed in a singular or a monolithic context.
Right.
And
it's context specific.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we forget to do is we forget to actually look at the world we're living in. We forget to actually observe what is actually going on around us. I could spend all my time in my office just looking at a model and, man, how do I run that play in 5 different countries? And I think that's a bad focus because you're actually not paying attention. And so if you shift your focus and say, okay, forget about the models, forget about what worked for someone else, just look at the world. What's actually happening in the world around you? And then how are those things that are going on in the world around you affecting you in the context you're in? So I've been watching and kind of following global trends for the past dozen years or so, and just keeping track of these trends as they've developed. And what I've noticed is that there are 6 really big mega trends, and I'm just calling them forces.
Okay.
And what they are just things that are actually shaping the way we live our life, whether we acknowledge it or not. They're actually shaping the way we live. And I'm just saying living as just a citizen in the world.
Right. Somebody who's living and breathing and moving about.
Exactly. And these 6 forces are pressing upon us. And since they are pressing upon us, we should actually be thinking about these in relation to the mission, in relation to church planting. Okay,
so you're raising a question in my mind.
Yes.
Are you suggesting then, because we are so tied into models, and I love that you were talking about this because I mentioned to you guys just a moment ago that I've had 2 conversations with 2 missionaries in 2 completely different parts of the world just today about the same subject and how disheartened they are that we just keep cookie cutter model in these different countries without regard to context. So are you saying that we need to be paying attention to these forces because they will and they should in some way, right or wrong, good or bad, will shape the way in which we should do mission?
Absolutely. They'll shape it. And I would even suggest that if you're following a model and it's like not working, you're trying to do something, and it's probably because you have not acknowledged one of these forces. And these things are actually there and present, and they're operating as disruptors, right? All these forces end up being disruptors. And so you try to run some play somewhere that someone else did, and then you're going to hit this. You're going to hit one of these 6 things. Probably you're going to hit more than one, and they're going to disrupt the model. And this is why you've got burnout, attrition, frustration, deconstructing of the church, all of these things that are going on, because I think we're just too busy trying to run a model instead of actually paying attention to the world around us.
Well, what a great point.
So before we launch in, again, I almost feel like this is like setting the table, right? Like just making sure that we're having all the pieces at the right place. To the naysayer who might be listening and saying, we are living in a world that feels like it is moving more towards homogeneity, right? That there is the globalization, if you will. It's moving towards, we're all moving to a similar spot. So model binder people thinking, refer to part 1, it seems like that actually looks like it should work more in the future because of homogeneity. So many more people are having the same experiences. So because of that, shouldn't we embrace models more as opposed to run from them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I think a lot of people probably do feel that way, and but I'm not certain that the thought of it actually homogenizing is actually happening.
Yes, correct. I totally agree. I just,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like so many people are thinking that it's moving in this way. So whether reality says it's happening or not, there is almost a thought that it might. And so because it might, then we're all embracing these models for that future day in which this fantasy actually happens, but it's not happening.
Yeah. Well, it's an underestimation of the forces of culture, the power that culture has on people to continue to shape, even in spite of globalization. I mean, in one sense, you can't deny globalization. I mean, the access that we have to each other is unprecedented today because of travel or the internet or whatever. And they are influencing people in different cultures, but still the culture itself has such a power on people's identity that, at least as I observe the world, we're not seeing that people are willingly relinquishing their cultural identity in order to arrive at some global culture.
Yeah. Well, and all you have to do is just take a survey of. You can take a survey of the world politically, or even just zero in a little bit more on the survey of the United States politically. Has globalization led us to be more unified as a country or more divided? And so what tends to happen is that globalization pushes division. It actually creates forms of nationalism, and these will be some of the forces we'll look at. But they'll start to separate. And so the reality is it's way more complex of a thing than just, hey man, we're all just gonna grab a Coke and teach the world to sing,
that was a great commercial though, wasn't it? Years ago.
It certainly was.
Well, if they make a commercial out of it, then
my goodness, that song is running through my head.
Sorry.
Well, let's stop you.
Kind of dated myself there.
I would say, let's stop you. Okay, so we are talking about
I was
forces.
Thinking that we should all start singing it.
No. Do you want to get copyright infringement on the podcast? Come on, stop. Okay, so we have forces. There are forces that are impacting all of us. These are global forces. So as I see from you, Steve, you say the first force that comes to mind are global pandemics. What do you mean there? I mean, again, I think we all know what COVID was and is and still shaping us, but how is this first major force something that is impacting the church?
So what's interesting is when I was writing these forces down, I actually, had these written before COVID, and
Oh
I would
my.
have never actually thought. I mean, I saw that global pandemics would be a reality. Never really would have thought of it. I mean, COVID just drove that thing, the needle so far down as to what it did.
Mm-hmm.
But the essence of a global pandemic, of course, is the fact that we all can infect each other. So it ends up being a relational dynamic, right? And so suddenly you have to start redefining a whole bunch of things. And when you're talking about the church, now you're redefining what is a meeting. I find it fascinating. I mean, just looking at COVID, for example, churches that were never online, some smaller churches that never had any video or anything. And suddenly now they have online presence, they have Zoom, and things that, it pushed them into technology they would have never thought they would have ever had to get.
Mm-hmm.
But we had to think through the Lord's table. We had to think through meeting. We had to think through the various responses because everybody has a different view of how they want to treat their body and their health concerns. And so suddenly we have division in the church over mask wearing or not mask wearing. And there was a pastor friend of mine who'd been in ministry 40 years and been through a lot. And he said the COVID experience was the worst experience he ever had as a pastor.
Yeah.
And he could not believe that the church was dividing over mass. But it wasn't just dividing over mass. This thing was evoking fear in us because global pandemics bring fear and anxiety. And we didn't have a place to hang those thoughts. And I would suggest what happens with model thinking is when you're in model thinking, you're actually not thinking about what's going on in the world, so you're not planning for it. You're just trying to run your play. So when something happens like this force acts upon you, you have no response because you're not paying attention to it. And you don't know what to do. And so you tend to try to keep your organization alive, the institution alive, but not recognizing that the people aren't necessarily concerned about the things you might be concerned about, let's say, as a pastor. But the people are trying to figure out, will I ever go to church again? And if I go to church, will I kill my grandmother if I get sick? And I mean, they're dealing with these very big existential questions because a pandemic is relational in nature. It's not just medical, it's a relational pressure. And so it's putting a pressure on the relational side of the church. And we don't really think through relationships with pandemics. We just think through, will people come? Will they give their money? Will we have our Sunday meeting or not? If we're just thinking institutionally, we're missing the fact that everyone else is processing through this relationally. And what role does my church play in my relationships? Should meeting be an issue that we would defy the government over? What is considered persecution? All of these really big questions start coming up existentially. And if we're not really having thought through this issue and pressed to think through the relational issues of pandemics, we're going to have what we had, just division and kind of a bit of a chaotic feeling, I think.
Okay. So again, we here at the Ephesiology Podcast are not trying to come up with a brand new model to institute for everybody and say all those other models were the wrong ones, but ours, we have figured it out. That said, Steve, what would you suggest aside from think through it, right? What would you suggest to pastors, church leaders, the faithful who tune into us? How would you suggest that they go about thinking through the notion of relationships in global pandemics?
I think we've got to take a moment and first do a bit of a theological assessment and evaluate our ecclesiology. What are the things that we're holding on to that we think are 100% biblical, therefore we're willing to die for them, that maybe aren't as biblical as we thought they were? They were areas of freedom that the Lord gives us. So, for example, meeting in a large room, you've got 1,000 people. Do 1,000 people need to meet in a large room? And is that actually the definition of a church? Or can we say, hey, we need to meet together, we need to gather together, And we don't necessarily have to gather in this large auditorium. We could break up into smaller groups and have a much more smaller community thing that fits within the what would be required in a pandemic, and still call that church. So I think we've got to think through, first of all, some ecclesiology. What is our understanding of the gathering? What are some of the things that the pressures we put on gathering that are just expressions that we have the freedom to have, but they're not actually the irreducible biblical minimum. And so I think it begins by evaluating our ecclesiology. If we're going to say, hey, are we ever going to have another global pandemic? I'm sure we will.
It's I think at this point it feels more whole lot like when.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the systems are already set up within the government and everything's ready. I mean, to pull that trigger would not be that difficult. I'm not saying one's around the corner. I'm not a prophet. And
there's nothing like doomsayer type
right.
recording here. Here we go.
Exactly. But I think for us right now, in a moment when we're not under that pressure, let's really think through our ecclesiology a little bit. What is the church? What does a gathering literally mean or biblically mean? How do we encourage one another? How do we love one another? I think the church needs to take a step back and evaluate, how did we do loving people? How did we do loving our enemy? How did we do submitting to authority? How did we do? Let's do a little bit of I was in the military and we used to do a thing called a hot wash, they called it. And the hot wash, everybody took their outer shirt off. So because your rank is on your shirt, you take it off, everybody goes in with their t-shirt on and they evaluate the mission. But there's no rank in the room. So everybody can say whatever they want. I think we got to do a little bit of a hot wash. How did we do? Did we show the world the love of Jesus? Did we show that we belong to Jesus by our love for one another? How do we do that?
That's so important, Steve. I am so glad that you raised that because I'm not so certain that we've done that. I think we're at the point where we've kind of dusted off our shoes, washed our hands and said, we're done with the pandemic now. It's back to the status quo. And so what you're saying is important for us to really sit back and do an assessment of how did we do during this pandemic.
Yeah.
I would contend that we ended up, disagree with me, please, but I just feel we are a whole lot more divided after after the pandemic. But rewinding, where were we as far as a nation prior to March, or January, February 2020? And now I feel we are much more separated. I feel we are much more divided. And so we are at those hyper ends. So the church ended up not becoming more loving. It became more bifurcated and entrenched.
And that's specifically the American,
I did say
the Western church. Yeah, you did say that. Steve, you have a global perspective. You guys are working all over the world. Thinking about what you just said, how would you look at what you saw globally speaking in regards to how the church interacted with the world as well as with the body of Christ?
Yeah, I would definitely say there was a lot more aggressiveness in the West, because in the West, we have a little bit more like our voice matters. Like it doesn't matter what the government says, my voice matters. And of course, that's part of the ethos of the United States that, right, as citizens, we have a voice. So I'm not anti-American in that regard. But I would say in other countries of the world, it wasn't as hostile of an experience. It was just a shared experience. There was sorrow and there was grieving over death, but there was just a kind of a power down. And there were some countries that, there's one place that we work that they literally last week just lifted their COVID restrictions. Just last week. So, but the people this is what it is. This is what we have to do to be safe. And so there was more of an acceptance of that. This is just what we have to do. And so I think there was not as much turning on on each other. because the bigger concern that I had is because we hadn't really thought through our ecclesiology and we hadn't thought through what it means to love each other. And so we kind of turned on each other in this season, and it became, I think our views and maybe our political views connected too closely to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we ended up really attacking, but cross-culturally in other contexts, and hearing from our missionaries and stuff, it was not as hostile of an experience.
And I do think would try to be fair, right? As I'm hearing you, Steve, and thinking about that global perspective, I don't also want to give such a poor grade as if all of the churches in America or all of the churches in the West got a big failing grade. Usually the ones who fail loudest are the bigger ones who are closer to the microphone. And so that is the impression that it all went poorly, because there were so many churches that doubled down on love and care for neighbor. And there were so many that really did have that outward focus and that love. And so again, I don't want to, the entire Church of the West just got a big F because some of the louder and bigger ones became more entrenched. That was not on the whole, but both were seen.
Yeah, there's always a danger when you do aggregate numbers, right? There's always a danger when you summarize a general experience, because the church that I attend did not have that kind of division, and we were shepherded well by the leaders, and there was a lot of care, and so there were a lot of really faithful people and wonderful believers that did love each other well. I think we saw probably every kind of response, at least in but I think for some, even if it wasn't a hostile or negative experience, there were still many struggles,
right,
that churches, and I think all the churches experience at least a struggle. How are we moving forward? Apart from even the division within the church, what does it mean when we can't meet? And how do we maintain a functioning body in a world where you have to stay within your bubble? And so to really kind of think that through, we were forced to think through our ecclesiology all of a sudden in 1 week. Things just kind of stopped, and we weren't ready for that.
Okay, so Steve Leston's word of advice: think through your theology and ecclesiology now, both looking back, how did we do, and looking forward, what is most important to us? What do we see in the Bible? Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, and if you're planting a church, start thinking through lockdowns. Are you ready for that? Put that into your operating system.
That's kind of a harrowing thought, right? Like, wait, what? I'm just trying to tell people about Jesus, and I'm trying to get this thing off the ground, and you're telling me plan for your next pandemic.
Yeah, at least think it through, because that's the world we're living in. Again, and this kind of goes back to the initial conversation, which is, let's not just think through running our play. Let's think through the world we're actually living in. This is actually the world we're living in. And our role is to function within that space. And it's not, I don't build a counter space in one sense that is immune from all of this, right? We're not pulling little communes away and just kind of, we are living in this space. And so we should, part of our thing of sharing Christ is actually being ready for the next pandemic, like to actually say, hey, we're going to have a gospel response to this. And in the course of equipping our saints, we're going to bring these topics up. Here's what love will look like in this context, in this context, in this context.
Yeah, it's so good, Steve. I appreciate that. It's funny. I was just sitting here thinking, this pandemic really did take us by surprise. But isn't it funny? It shouldn't have, because it's not like it's the first pandemic the church has ever experienced.
Exactly.
Yeah. Wow. Good advice. Force number 2.
Yeah. Force number 2, global migration. Now that one probably another obvious one. We're seeing migration occur all over the world, and we've got to think about this topic more than just our opinion about migrants.
Mm-hmm.
It's bigger than just a political issue. Let me toss one thing out. I've got a ton of statistics and stuff and different elements we can look at, but the first thing I want to bring up is a kind of a counterpoint that I like to just toss out to make people go, what? Which is global migration is actually one of the qualifications of an elder. And you say, what does that mean? One of the gifts, or one of the qualifications of an elder is hospitality. And the word hospitality is lover of strangers, lover of migrants, lover of foreigners. It's not just, man, people can show up to your home and you'll feed them a pizza. It isn't just that. It isn't that you're kind to the people in your church. It's actually that you're kind to the foreigners that come, the strangers that come. It's literally lover of strangers. But we've kind of like domesticated that word and maybe brought it down to just you're friendly and your wife can, cook a meal when you come over and you feel at home. But actually, I think that qualification was pushing us because the church itself, think about this as ephesiology, right?
Yes.
One of the key to ephesiology is the book of Ephesians, and in the church in Ephesus, Jew and Gentile being, one body, right? And this is that thing that's going to show forth the power and wisdom of God to the angelic world, that God can reveal this mystery that both Jews and Gentiles are full takers of the promises of God. And so he's making one body, one temple out of all the nations of the world. Therefore, it would stand firm that Paul would tell Timothy, the qualification of an elder is that you've got to be able to love the stranger. If you as an elder aren't capable of doing that, you're not qualified to be a shepherd in this church because you're only going to love your own kind. And so the idea is like saying, hey, as a church, let's stop and think this through for a minute, because there's a political reality to migration, but there's also a reality that there are people from all over the world that are moving all over the world legally. I'm not even talking about illegal migration. I'm just saying legally.
Right.
And so if you think about that, in the period between 2020 and mid 2021, so just not even a full year.
Yeah.
253 million people migrated from their birth country to another country. That's according to the United Nations.
Wow.
Just roughly, let's say a year. 253 million people, that's legal migration. That's not illegal, first of all, but that's legal migration. So deep in our heart, are we acknowledging as leaders, as elders, here's a challenge to an elder, to say, wait a minute, part of our qualification is to love those people that have moved to our neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Have we thought through that? And because that's part of the biblical mission and the qualification of the elder. So that's just one element of global migration we've got to think through.
Yeah, that's good. I love that you brought that up. Hospitality isn't just simply inviting your neighbor over, although it can include that. Yep. But it's looking at the diversity that's in your neighborhood and loving all of those people.
Yeah.
I think with the global migration, and Steve, stop me if I end up going too far into a different one, but thinking through migration just because people are moving from one country to the next is a large number. Thinking through migration because a country becomes war-torn and people have to flee and they have to seek asylum because everything is going wrong in their country, now increases that to a much greater exponential of migration. And So last year, I, my wife and I, as well as others from our church, we went to Athens, Greece, and we got to sit and listen to people who had essentially been on the front lines when the global migration arrived in Greece's shores in numbers that no one could fathom. Yeah. And they were trying to build camps and help people and get them through to wherever they needed to go. And Greece being the southernmost portion of the EU, everybody wanted to get to Greece and everybody wanted to get through. And so we were listening to church leaders who were saying, we were doing all we could to care just for our churches. And then the world showed up at our shores.
Yeah. That's right.
And we worked with a church, Poritas, I think. I said it wrong every single time, so I'm certain I'm saying it wrong now. In Athens, and they had a focus on a homeless ministry there. And a lot of homeless people lived right next to the port. And so their church would care for the homeless and feed them every week. And then the world came, and all of these refugees came to that same port. And so one single church who was caring for a few homeless people all of a sudden had refugees upon refugees showing up at their door needing food. And so a church, I think their church size was 50 to 60 people, were now feeding hundreds daily and trying to get food in their faces and get them down to get showers. And they were caring for something far beyond their expectation or planning ever. But I was looking this up earlier when you and Michael were talking kind of at the close of force number 1. In basketball, there is kind of a type of offense that they will run called a read and react, right? You need to know your system and you need to know your players so well so that you can read what's coming and you can react. You know how to run your stuff because you are ready. You can read and you can react. And that church is, by the way, they're still doing this, or are constantly trying to react to what God is sending them, to the refugees coming to their shore. And I watched what happened and I thought, I don't know how we would react at my church and our churches in America if this same influx of people came. Would we be ready? I don't think we would. But global migration is something that is very real. It is very much happening, and it is a constant.
Well, Andrew, in your guys' case, it has happened. I mean,
Yes.
Houston's a big receiving city of refugees. And you made the comment, which I think is spot on, that we read and react what it is that God's doing, what he's sending our way. And that, I mean, that tells us that we need to know, we need to know something about him, God, and we need to be willing to stop reading whatever we've been reading so that we can look to him and respond to what it is that he's doing through all of these things.
I will say, as a moment of, like, again, because I try not to like toot our own horn, right? Like I'm like, I actually work at a church, so I don't want to make it always seem like Neartown has it all figured out and we're doing great. But we have done collaboration in our city now for years and years. And I think as of the past year and a half, 2 years, I think we're starting to see some of that fruit of collaboration. And many Afghanis settled into apartments that were right by our church. And our church is near another church, and we office with them. And they said, hey, let's see what we could do to to bless these Afghanis. And I will fast forward this. The culmination was working with a local school, inviting all of the kids from the local school soccer team, and then inviting the kids from the Afghani community to come and play soccer with each other. And then inviting the boys from that school to learn from the Afghanis, kind of some of their culture, what was going on in their world, an opportunity to bless and break bread with the parents of those families. And so a bunch of churches and an organization called Houston Welcomes Refugees and that local school, St. Thomas, like it was this huge collaborative effort of like, you're here and we want to bless you and we want to learn from you. And so I was so encouraged by it, because it wasn't like any one person sat down and said, okay, I'm going to do this, but it is what God brought us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one event, right? It's one event. And I'm looking forward to seeing what God continues to do, but we have to be ready. We have to be ready for what God sends us.
Well, we have to think, just one kind of short final comment on that is, when we talk about migration, sometimes it is a political topic, but if we for a moment can set that aside and recognize that from the very beginning, God was a God for the nations, right? From going from Abraham, that through the seed, the nations are going to be blessed, to Paul in Ephesians 3, that the revelation that was revealed to him was that this gospel was for everyone, that the promises of God are for everyone, and the building of a church of all nations is the thing that proclaims the power, the strength, the manifold strength and manifold wisdom of God. So the migration issue isn't just like a pandemic, something we have to deal with. The global migration issue is the very essence of what we need to be thinking about.
It's an opportunity, isn't it?
It's the opportunity in the most simplest form for us to see God being worshiped among the heavenly realms, because we actually recognize that God wants the nations to be reached. God wants the nations in his church, that he is building a church of all the nations, so that in Revelation chapter 5, verse 9, every tribe, every nation, every tongue is coming before the Lamb. All of them are. They're all coming. And that he's taking from every tribe, nation, and tongue to make them a kingdom of priests, to give them a place and a seat at the table, like all of these promises. So when we think about global migration, we just have to recognize, why would God do this? God's going to do this because he's going to get his church. This is the essence of it. The qualification of an elder is to be a part of that, to show love towards that. So we've got to push our ecclesiology a little bit more to recognize that this is the very heartbeat of the church. This is actually part of its DNA. It's just not a side crisis. It's a very DNA issue.
Right. And what you're talking about is so fascinating, because the difference between Force 1 and Force 2 is, one is an event, I mean, an ongoing event, right? The global pandemic, at some point that will wane. But one is an event and one is the norm, right?
Yeah.
One is there are migrants. They are around you. How are you welcoming them? Period. Starting place.
And you have a theology for that, not just a reaction to that.
Yeah.
It's just embedded in your
That's
understanding of your ecclesiology.
I like that. That's good, Steve.
Well, with that barn burner of a question, we're gonna just wrap this one up. We've only covered 2 of Steve's 6 observed forces, which is going to make the next podcast extremely exciting as we try to blaze through and be wowed by what God has been doing in Steve, where we all are learners and get to kind of to take this stuff and reflect. Steve, as we did last time, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to connect with you, if any of these things have scratched their mind and they want to reach out about it?
They can just go to Every Tribe on the contact page. There's a way to get a hold of me.
Excellent. All right. Well, Steve, thank you very much. Michael, thank you very much. My name is Andrew. We have been blessed to have you as a part of the Ephesiology Podcast. If you want to connect with us, find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Hit us up there. And we look forward to having you join us next time on the Ephesiology Podcast.